I'm the host for the show. We are broadcasting from the law office of Alan Butel in downtown Las Vegas. This show, Fired Up, is about guns-related politics and self-defense issues, a lot of self-defense issues. Fired Up is on radio on KSHP 1400 AM. We're broadcast there from 9 to 10 p.m. on any week we're not being blanked out by a Dodger game, which includes today. So you can tune in KSHP 1400 AM, listen to the Dodgers play, but this show on YouTube will be there and they stay up forever. So if you miss anything, you can tune it up and find out what I said wrong 2 years ago. Anyway, we're on YouTube all the time. Go to Fired Up with Bob Irwin once you're on the YouTube page. Tonight's guest is firearms instructor and terrorism expert, really, Lenny Davis. Lenny, I'd like you to do a little bit of your background, if you would, and what you do.
I can do that. Yeah, my name's Lenny Davis, as Bob said. I'm a retired special agent with U.S. Customs and Department of Homeland Security, and I'm a certified, if you will, subject matter expert in terrorism by the U.S. State Department. And I spent over 8 years going around the country, or going around the world, actually teaching anti-terrorism to friendly governments, including our own.
Which is more friendly now.
Much more friendly.
If you have a question or comment about anything to do with the show, you can reach me through email or text at bob@firedupmail.com, or that's for email. And now, as of this day, today, I have installed a answering machine in my home office. So you may call, if you wish, to the number on the wall there, 702-257-1060. And there's a recorder on it. I check it at least once every 24 hours if you have a question or comment, if you would kindly identify yourself and what you're calling in reference to. I'll get back to you. So nice to have a phone now. Anyway, we are generally talking about firearms self-defense. There are several hundred defensive cases every week in the United States, around 200 to 300, depending on whose survey you're taking. Often not covered by the mainstream media because most of them are no shots fired, or the lady points the gun and the guy runs. And it's a firearm self-defense, but it doesn't make national news. The ones that make national news are where shooters do something stupid, usually, yes. And that makes the national news. So we'll usually start off with a few of those. We're going to do that with this show as regular. I want to caution listeners, we're dealing with, in most cases here, most instances, cases that take place all across the United States and occasionally one from Canada or England. The comments are directed at how you would react under Nevada law. What we're trying to do is make you safe so you can put yourself in the position of the person who was involved in the particular incident and not go to criminal trial and not end up being sued out of your house and, you know, out of your socks and losing your house over doing something foolish. If you are involved in an actual case, you need to get local counsel in the jurisdiction you live in for that, because local law changes dramatically. What is obviously a valid shooting in Idaho isn't going to be a valid shooting in New York City. So, and every sorts of thing in between. So, local counsel if you're dealing with your personal case. First, I want to correct something from last week's show. Grant Defense is a manufacturing company that makes some really cute, they're manufacturing AR-15s from scratch here in Las Vegas, building all their own parts, and some really great Glock 19s that I'm really impressed with. They're going to have their grand opening on June 3rd. You may call them if you wish at 702-675-3901. Last week, when I announced this same thing, I said they were located at the corner of Jones and Decatur. It is not Jones and Decatur. It's Russell and Decatur. And Jones and go the same way. So anyway, their opening is going to be June 3rd. They're right next door, if you know where it is, to the Dewey Animal Shelter. So you can go by there and adopt a puppy, and you have a barking alarm and get a new Glock 19
What a great
from Grant.
what a great combination of self-defense, home defense.
Yes, dogs work. They
Yeah,
bark.
oh, they
They
do.
wake you up. Okay, we're going to start out. This is from the Times Record and Fox 16 TV, also in Fort Smith, Arkansas, back on the 19th of this month. This is a case from the 1st, and this was just reported on the 19th. Fort Smith police were dispatched at 11 a.m. on reports of a shooting at the Fort Smith Blueprint Company. They make blueprints in the 1200 block of Rogers Avenue, if you're familiar with Fort Smith. The employees told police a 41-year-old male had entered the business yelling about weapons. He said he was being chased. He was carrying a large rock and asked to leave multiple times. He ran into the wall with his face, knocked over displays, ignoring the employee's request that he leave the premises. When the intruder held up a large rock, the rock in this case was the size of a softball described, apparently he was trying to throw it. An employee discharged a 9mm handgun, hitting this guy in the shoulder. The intruder moved backwards as if he'd been hit, but then threw the rock at the employee that had the gun, narrowly missing him. After review by the prosecutor's office, the shooting was deemed justified last Tuesday on the 19th. Sebastian County Prosecutor Dan Shu wrote in a news release, "It is the opinion of this office that the employee was justified in his use of force, which does not merit the file any criminal activity or criminal charges." Shu noted a person is justified in using deadly force if another person is, he reasonably believes the other person is committing or about to commit a felony involving force or violence, or using or about to use unlawful deadly physical force. He went on, and a little more here. The law goes on to say the person may not use deadly force in self-defense if the person knows that he or she can avoid the necessity of using deadly physical force by retreating. However, that person is not required to retreat if the person is unable to retreat safely. That is essentially the same as Nevada law. You're not required. We have a stand your ground statute here. You may stand your ground. We recommend retreat if you possibly can for other reasons, but if you're permitted to stand your ground. No Blueprint Shop employees were injured in the incident. They were, while being treated at the Fort Smith EMSs and transported to the local hospital, as Perp admitted to injecting and smoking methamphetamine that morning. Attack with a rock. There's always a new.
Well, in my former career as a customs special agent, and this is and with the Border Patrol, this is a very common thing. There's been literally dozens of shootings of Border Patrol shooting illegal aliens who've been up on the fence and who have thrown rocks at them. And if you go to any of the Border Patrol stations on the border, you'll notice their vehicles have this fencing across it, this barriers across all the windows, because these guys throw rocks from the fence on the other side. So there's been several cases where Border Patrolmen have been struck with large rocks and returned fire and killed the suspects. So this is throwing a rock is not a smart thing.
No, obviously, and it can obviously cause physical harm. And if in this case with this rock, obviously it was large enough to cause death if need be. And I wanted to make a note in this case. This is also fairly common because viewers watching television get the impression when people are shot, they fall down. And this guy was hit with a 9mm and threw the rock anyway.
Yeah, and as Bob and I will both attest as firearms instructors that it's bullet placement where you put the bullet, especially with a handgun. A handgun is not you can't make up for poor marksmanship with a bigger caliber. It doesn't work that way. You can watch the movies and the guys get hit, and it always cracks me up. The guy gets hit in the arm or the shoulder, and oh, I'm okay. And it's like, yeah, right. But it won't necessarily stop somebody in a real world shooting. So it's really bullet placement.
exactly. And reacting properly. The guy was given lots of warnings, which, will go well if there's any lawsuits over this and so forth, because this wacko will have a family who obviously want to sue the business for wrongfully injuring a guy who was only spaced out on drugs. This is from the Progress Index on the 20th in Petersburg, Virginia. This is a one source story, which I don't like to use. I've actually got two of them in this outline because it's pretty good. It's a wonderfully good shooting. They reported in Petersburg, Virginia, this Progress Index, that a week earlier on April 13th, just before noon, local law enforcement responded to 114 South West Street. That's South and West Street, the south end of West Street, on a burglary in progress call. The victims were in their upstairs bedroom when they heard a loud noise they reported as an intruder kicking the front door, trying to gain entry. They stayed put, called 911, and waited for him to come to them. Good idea. Couple of minutes later, a male dressed in all black entered the room with a gun and fired a shot into the ceiling. The subject was heard by them saying, "Give it up or I'm going to kill you." The victim rolled out of bed, grabbed her gun from her purse, and fired at the subject in the room. She believes the offender was hit by the gunfire because he moved quickly to one side. The suspect then fled the area. He was described as a male with a short haircut, wearing a black hoodie, black pants, and something wrapped around the lower portion of his face. Nothing was taken from the residence. Pittsburgh Major Police Crimes Unit is investigating. I put this in. It's obviously a valid shoot, and it's just great, perfect, tactical. They didn't go down the stairs to find the guy. They waited for him to come. He came into their bedroom. She rolls over out of bed to get behind the mattress because we all believe mattresses are bulletproof because they are on television. They're really not. But it looks good on TV. Anyway, she grabbed her gun, fires at him because he's already firing. She can't really tell he's not shooting at her. They found later the bullet went in the ceiling. There were no follow-up stories because nobody cares, because nobody got murdered, raped, or whatever. But this is a perfect reaction by somebody who's obviously trained and practiced with their firearm. Fine job.
Yeah, the only thing I would have said different with this is she rolled out of bed, waited till the guy was in the room. If I knew there was somebody downstairs, I would have stayed put, but I would have had my gun out and ready to go at that point. So,
yeah,
but
and she may have been sound asleep and not realize, that. But they said they were awakened by the noise downstairs, so she was aware. Anyway, good shoot.
Good shoot.
And perfect. I want to remind everybody I'm no longer with the gun store on Tropicana. I retired from there, but we still recommend their low-cost concealed carry permit classes. They run them every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. They're $50 for the renewal, and I think $75. They change it once in a while. Anyway, you can go to their website, thegunstorelasvegas.com. If you own a self-defense firearm, get training. The gun store is one of 100 places that teach it around town. Get training and practice so you can be like this lady and not like a few others we're going to talk about later on.
Well, and just a real quick point about training, folks. It's almost like insurance. If you go get training and you can show, if you, heaven forbid, you ever have to be in a shooting, but if you go to a shooting and you go to a hearing, or you go to the judge, or it gets that far that you get sued, and you have a stack of training certificates an inch thick, for where you not only got your CCW training, but you got continuing training, no matter where you got it from, that will help you a lot. That's almost like an insurance policy.
It really is, because it gives you a defense when you're sued. And as a lot of listeners know, I do a lot of expert witness work in shootings, and it is so hard to defend people when they get into home invasion shooting and they fire their gun and they miss and the bullet goes across the street and hits somebody or endangers somebody, or they don't use a warning where they had opportunity to use a warning. Get training in how your gun works. This is going to take place in the middle of the night, probably when you're sound asleep. You're not going to be ready. You got to practice the motions of clearing jams and things to get through this. Practice. This is Pantagraph.com on the 22nd in Bloomington, Ohio. A woman said she was fearing for her life when she shot an intruder who tackled her after she discovered him in the garage of her parents' home on Clayton Street around 1:30 Friday morning. That's 1:30 a.m. type. Anything could have happened just the way he lunged at me, she was saying. I had a gun in his face and told him not to come out or I would shoot. He probably thought I wouldn't shoot. Let me give a little more detail here. About 1:30 a.m., the alarm went off at the house and they noticed a light on in the garage. The elderly mother handed her daughter her father's .32 caliber handgun while her sister grabbed a pipe. There are two adult women, an elder woman, and a child in the house. The sister grabbed a pipe, the other one got a .32 caliber handgun, and they walked outside to the detached garage. The intruder opened up the overhead garage door and, according to the woman, lunged at me, tackled me. We wrestled all the way over to my sister's car, which was in the driveway, the shooter said. He grabbed her, pulling her down, and that's when she shot him. He fled the garage, but was apprehended by responding officers because they were already on the way. 21-year-old suspect from Bloomington was taken to a local hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. He has been charged with 1 count of burglary, 1 count of battery. He's being held in the McLean County Jail after posting $5,200. He's going to be arraigned on May 22nd. The police continue to investigate the incident. Whether the gun was registered, they're investigating whether the gun was registered as one of the items. But based on the facts at the time, no, the police said that no charges will likely be filed against the shooter. The parents added the alarm system after a previous burglary. The intruder made himself at home in the garage. He got a soft drink out of the refrigerator in the garage. The sisters say they confronted him because they felt the need to protect her parents and their 13-year-old granddaughter. Another single source story, but this is a couple of things come to light. This is very courageous of them to do. Going out to a detached garage.
Not the greatest tactics in the world.
Yeah, the previous couple was a little smarter. And again, we're running into this. They're investigating because her handgun was unregistered. Her father passed away years ago. This is a gun that he got during World War II, and gave it to the daughter for home protection or whatever before he passed away a couple of years ago. So they're investigating to see if the gun was registered. Giving the bad guy a hook to sue you, one of them is you're carrying a concealed gun without a permit. Yeah, you can get a concealed permit. We're a shall issue state. Most states issue permits now. Some of them only do it in theory only.
Yeah.
They do it.
People's Republic of California.
If you have a handgun that you're going to use for self-defense, yeah, we don't register it anymore. So now this wouldn't happen here because we don't use blue cards anymore. But if you need a permit to carry the way you're carrying it, fine, get a permit, go through the process, try to do everything you can legally so you don't give the other side's attorneys a hook to come after you.
Tactically wise, here's my problem with this. This is a detached garage. It's not the house that you're living in and the people that you're protecting. These two ladies went outside the house. I don't think that's ever a good idea. There's nothing in that. If there's no loved one in that garage, if there's just stuff in your garage, no matter how precious you think it is, if it's not another human being, don't go out there. I mean, this turned out okay for her, but she could have just as easily been knocked down by this guy, the gun taken away from her, and killed with her own gun. They didn't have to put themselves out there. They didn't have to go outside the safety of that home. This is where we recommend you're on 911, call the police, get them rolling there, stay inside that house. Now, if that intruder decides that he's going to go from the garage into the house, that's a whole different ballgame. And you make him come through that fatal funnel, which is the door. But don't put yourself in a situation like the earlier folks. They did that really relatively well because they didn't go downstairs. When I teach home defense to people, I tell them, don't ever go downstairs and try to clear your house. It's a very difficult thing to do. You see in the movies all the time, one or two guys clearing a house, one or two cops clearing a house. Well, I was on our special response teams for 11 years. I've been teaching SWAT teams since the mid 80s. I still teach a law enforcement, basically search how to conduct search warrants, not on both on a investigator level and a SWAT level. It's very, very difficult to clear a house, and if you're by yourself, you are just really putting yourself in a bad spot. So, in this respect, yes, it turned out good, but I think we can show through our tactics that this was probably not the best thing for them to have done, go outside to a detached garage.
Yep, I just realized I left my phone. Don't go looking for trouble. It's just that simple. There are a whole bunch of guys that would love to rescue a damsel in distress. They have free lawyers, you don't. They have free body armor, you probably don't. They have lots of backup. They can get 500 guys there if they need them.
And they got lots more firepower than a 32 revolver or automatic.
Yeah, the little 32 Colt apparently was, but that would not be my first choice. But I know people that carry 32s that it's way ahead of no gun at all. So this is a kind of a vindication story, and one of the reasons I wanted Lenny here today to do this particular incident. Force Science is a place where I took a whole bunch of training years and years ago on use of force and how people react under stress and so on and so on. And they have come out just very recently with a report. I'm going to read a little bit. It's going to take about 3 or 4 minutes for me to read through this so you understand what's going on. For decades, warning shots have been strongly discouraged, if not outright prohibited, in training and policies of American law enforcement agencies. True. Now, 11 prestigious professional policing organizations, including International Association of Chiefs of Police, Fraternal Order of Police, the National Tactical Officers Association, have recommended that this once scorned use of force be permitted under certain circumstances. That U-turn is reflected by the National Consensus Policy on Use of Force issued early this year, which its creators represent the best thinking of some of the most significant law enforcement leadership and police labor organizations in the United States. In a section devoted to deadly force, the consensus acknowledges that warning shots are inherently dangerous. We all agree. But the guidelines suggest they might be permitted when use of deadly force is justified, when a warning shot will not pose substantial risk of injury or death to officers or others. This is a police organization, that the officer reasonably believes that the warning shot will reduce the possibility that deadly force will have to be used. In a recent radio interview, IACP, that's the International Association of Chiefs of Police, Deputy Executive Director, a man named Terrence Cunningham, said a lot of discussion preceded this recommendation that the intent is to give officers more leeway when faced with a threat. He referenced this new environment and use of force where everybody is trying to learn how to do things better when they escalate. So he asked, why not give officers more tools? He thinks it's the right thing to do. Some trainers, however, express concern that adopting this policy will create a public expectation that warning shots should be fired before any use of force. An interesting counter. As regular listeners know, I'm one of the few that says I hate the never, never, never fire a warning shot. I've used the scenario, you're being charged by an unarmed 14-year-old boy who thinks that you murdered his mother, and he's going to hit you with a brick. Putting a round in between his feet, if he's not listening to your commands, might jar him to paying attention. If you know where the bullet's going, et cetera, et cetera. You've trained more guys than I have, although I got about 20,000 under my belt. So,
well, you probably got more than I've got. We've discussed this several times before in previous.
Yeah, but now I got people on my side.
I read this when I read this decision when it came out. Both the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and the NTOA, the National Tactical Officer Association. The NTOA shocked me the most because the NTOA is basically an association for SWAT teams and tactical operators. The problem that I still have with this, and in certain situations, I think, a warning shot would be very good. In a lot of situations like that I did in my previous life when I was out in the desert, arresting bad guys who were smuggling drugs into the area. We've had situations where, of course, we showed up with the helicopter, or we showed up, just jumped up and went, "Hi, we're here. Do you have anything to declare other than 1,000 kilos of cocaine in your aircraft?" Things get a little crazy. People start scattering. Well, there's times that you don't want to go, and it's usually at night. And we had a policy that unless we had an aircraft that was equipped with a FLIR, the infrared camera, so they could see heat signatures, we weren't going to go out through the brush looking for somebody. That's just asking for suicide. We had used flashbangs as sort of warning shots, and like, hey, we know you're in there, you might as well come out. And we've thrown a couple of flashbangs, and that worked well. In an urban situation, I'm not 100% sold that this might de-escalate anything. One, I still have the problem of what goes up must come down. Where you shoot that bullet, and you are responsible for that. So I would hate to be a police officer because you're going to have a split second to make this decision to fire a warning shot. Are you going to fire this warning shot? In what direction are you going to fire it? Did you not see that there's an apartment that you shot it towards and you hit somebody, or it goes over, it goes up, comes down, and comes into somebody's living room or whatever? I studied this, I looked at this pretty hard, and I see their points on it. I think it's going to come down to individual agencies. I can guarantee you there's going to be some agencies that are just never going to allow this. My former agency, Customs, and then DHS, the only warning shots that they ever allowed were in a maritime situation. And they were warning shots to be fired at both, trying to go fast. Yeah, trying to go away. So at that point, I can see that. So it's going to be really interesting. I haven't talked to too many people who are currently training law enforcement officers under this policy. So it's going to be, I think there's a lot of discussion to come on this.
There's going to be quite a bit. One of the things that I ran across in studies on warning shots, most agencies don't allow warning shots, period. So when we got officers involved in a pursuit, kind of similar to the Garner original pursuit case that caused all of this stuff, the officers in general, depending on the policy of their department, if they fired their gun, would not say, I was firing at a fleeing suspect, even though maybe they were, or it was a warning shot, even though maybe it was. They would say, they take one of two choices. They say, I fired at the guy because I thought I saw a threat and I missed, and I don't know where the bullet went, or I unfortunately, I had my finger on the trigger, I stumbled, whatever, and I had an accidental discharge. They would decide they had an AD, or they fired a shot that missed at firing at a suspect, when neither case was true. It was actually a warning shot, but they can't say that in their reports. So going back to studies 30, 40 years old on officer-involved shootings, you see a lot of these, I stumbled and had an AD, or I fired at the guy and missed. And that data is wrong because the officer was lying to protect himself from their own policy because he couldn't say, I shot at the guy. So the data that I've got, reams of data that go back 30, 40 years, the Geller studies, if you remember those going way back, that all that data is wrong because it depends on the policy of the department, whether he would say I fired and missed or I had an AD.
Yeah,
they're going to protect themselves by writing creative reports. Creative report writing is not taught in the academies, but it's taught in field training immediately. And
I have no direct recollection of that, Congressman.
yes.
I have written my own memos that said, "Dear Commissioner," no one was more surprised than I. But yeah, and I think there's a lot of real truth to that. That guys were firing warning shots. I know a friend of mine many years ago, in a Bay Area police department in California, was responding to an officer who'd been shot by a robbery suspect. He was in foot pursuit of this guy. The guy had it was nearly 100-yard head start through, or lead on him. He was carrying a Remington 870 loaded with 27 pellet, number 4 buckshot, 19 caliber pellets. He saw the guy. We're in an industrial area. It was late at night. He saw the guy getting ready to go around the corner. He was really frustrated, loosed around, more in frustration than anything else. Continued the pursuit, got around the corner, and there's a dead suspect. And one of those 27 pellets struck this guy literally at the base of his skull and the medulla and killed him instantly. He was dead before he hit the ground. It was ruled a good shooting. He was angry. He says, "Yeah, I was just angry. This guy was going to get away." He had shot one of their fellow officers, and the officer subsequently passed away. He didn't know that at the time, but he was frustrated. It's not, and these are things that guys are going to have to make that decision. I'm luckily I'm retired and out of that game because, in a situation like this, you fire a warning shot. Yeah, you might get the guy to stop. But then again, where's that round going to go?
Oh, yeah. And I'm not looking at this as a police problem, although it obviously is going to be. I'm looking at it as a civilian problem.
Yeah.
Because civilians constantly fire warning shots.
Right.
And rarely do they hit something they shouldn't hit. In most cases, I've worked several cases where people fired warning shots that the bullet hit nothing. They never found what it hit.
And mark my words, you had a shooting not too long ago in, I believe it was Florida, where a state trooper was in the middle of the highway and a guy was on top of him, severely beating him, and a civilian came out and just shot the guy. Yeah. It was a great shoot. He did absolutely the right thing. But I mark my words, there'll be some attorney sometime this will happen, the same situation or a similar situation will happen. And some attorney will come and sue him because he said, "Well, why didn't you fire a warning shot?" The IACP and the NTOA and all these people, it's going to happen.
It's going to go the other way. If the departments that allow warning shots, it's going to be, why didn't you fire a warning shot before you killed my client? Right. And the answer is always going to be, it wasn't practical. There was no good background. And that's going to go to the, why didn't you shoot him in the leg? And here we go down this marksmanship under stress thing that isn't going to happen. It's food for thought. We've done several cases here of civilians firing warning shots, and in most cases, the vast majority, they're fine. But we don't recommend warning shots. shouted warnings work better. And the other problem for you civilians out there, warning shots are often misinterpreted by the criminal as you're shooting at him, and they draw return fire. Where he's trying to run away, you fire a warning shot, he thinks you're shooting at him, and guess what? Now he shoots at you. And I've had one case I worked where actually that happened, and the fleeing guy fired over his shoulder and hit a non-combatant and injured them severely.
I was with our special response team in Los Angeles, and we were doing a joint warrant with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, Special Enforcement Bureau, their SWAT team. And at that time, they were using these multiple flashbang. You would throw a flashbang, and it had 4 or 5 different small charges that went off. And they used it for a distraction in the backyard, and the suspect started immediately shooting. And they took him into custody. He gave up. They returned fire and pumped some tear gas in it and negotiated him out. But he initially got off on the charges because he says, I thought somebody was in shooting at me for the multiple flashbangs. So those devices were kind of falling out of favor. I mean, they still use them. They're used in certain scenarios that I don't want to discuss here that are in the hostage rescue variety, but they stopped using them as distractions in the backyard.
I think everybody saw the house in Connecticut on TV.
They
used some distraction on that house.
Well, they used it. I will tell you what, and if you don't mind me jumping on a little tangent for just about a minute, we just had an administration that we had under 8 years that didn't like police, didn't want the police to have any kind of armored vehicles. We have a million military vehicles that we paid for that we don't use, that they were given through Homeland Security to law enforcement agencies. Yes, they're mine resistant, armored personnel carriers, but they're also bad guy resistant, armored personnel carriers. They went, and there is a picture, and I saw it just before I came here to the studio, of the front of this vehicle. And the vehicle they use is very much for you guys in construction or seen it, it's a little Bobcat that they have put an armored shell on, and they use the hooks, and they will pull open doors, pull open windows. Well, in the very front for the driver, there is a bulletproof glass there, and thank God it was bulletproof, because this individual who had killed a Delaware state trooper fired 13 rounds at another Delaware state trooper who was driving that vehicle. And because of that bulletproof glass or bullet resistant glass, he is in good shape, and the bad guy is dead. This is a perfect example of why, if we, everybody goes, oh, we're militarizing law enforcement. You know what? When a guy is barricaded in a house and he's trying to kill people, he's already demonstrated he has no problem in killing an armed police officer on duty. Why would you want to say, well, just go up there with your uniform and, just look like Adam 12, and, the 60s and the 70s are over with, folks. People have bad intent. There's terrorists. There's just a lot of evil people. My hat's off to the Delaware State SWAT team. Those guys were very professional, and they did what they were supposed to do and neutralize the suspect.
Okay.
And I'll get off my soapbox now.
I'll let you off your soapbox. I want to also mention, I did mention that we're at the law office of Alan Butel, who does criminal and civil defense and general business litigation. He's a frequent guest on the show. He gives free consultations on cases, 702-319-7800. If you have something to ask about criminal or civil law, he does general business stuff also, but does firearms related cases. That's how we met, actually. It was doing a case he was involved in. And secondly, for firearms trusts and class 3 firearms trusts, which are different, and we all know about trying to pass your firearms down to your children. All of this stuff is in flux right now with the new administration, because ATF is really trying to clean up what they're doing with, particularly with class 3s now. Lots of new regs coming. There is consideration of taking silencers, sound suppressors off of the Class 3 designation completely. So if you're thinking about buying a suppressor, wait about 45 days. You may discover that you can just buy one over the counter if this goes where ATF thinks it might go. Anyway, this is always changing. There's an attorney that I use for my personal stuff named Jerry Creed. He does the Firearms Trust if you would like. He's out in Summerlin on Federal Plaza Drive. But you can reach him at 702-806-7777 if you're interested in getting a firearms trust. I pointed out that we have a new telephone number I put in for Fire It Up. We could, actually, we're still trying to do the gun shows, and we can't do all of them. If we have somebody out there who's interested in being a freebie intern to work our table on occasion at the gun shows, when I can't be there or Charlie can't be there, then give me a call and we'll see if we can get you set up for that. And that's that. Now I want to flip discussions. This is another story which is I wanted to do when Lenny was here. I have several firearms instructors on my staff here that does these, but Lenny is so vastly experienced that you remember the attack in Fresno where we had an individual who just started randomly shooting people using radical Islamic statements and racist slogans. He later said he wanted to kill white people and so on and so on. What do you do as an armed individual with your CCW and your training? It's pretty easy to say when you walk into this appears right in front of your police officer, what you're going to do. Lenny's going to react the same way that I would react, or any ex-police officer. You're going to try and stop the guy right in front of you because he's trying to kill people or is killing people. Armed civilian. What you do. This is an opinion piece by Bob Irwin, and we're going to have an opinion from Lenny also. First rule of gunfights is don't get killed. So get yourself to a position where the guy can't shoot you. Hide behind something, get in a safe position so you can evaluate what's going on. Second, or simultaneously call 911 to get the real guys on the way that have body armor and free lawyers and all the tools they need. Due to the circumstances, if you were in the middle of the beginning of this shooting, would you engage the suspect or run? That's a decision that only you can make. There's good things and bad things here, but the decision is yours. If lives are on the line, personally, I would choose to engage. Could that be wrong? Yes. We've had rare cases where people walked into a movie set, didn't notice the yellow tape, or the people on the perimeter didn't tell them we're filming down here, it's a fake, whatever thing. It could be police training where the officers on the perimeter who are supposed to be watching away are watching what's going on, and you walk right by them and they don't see you, and you walk into a police scenario because they're using a real area to practice in, which they do. I realize that's possible, but my choice would be to shoot to save lives. A prosecutor looking at this case would likely agree that you acted responsibly by reacting to what you saw in front of you, and you were taking reasonable action because you're watching murders. If that doesn't work, certainly a jury would consider your actions reasonable under the speed and stress of the incident. And when I say that, I got to tell you, juries are always a crapshoot. Again, I do a lot of court work, and sometimes juries that you think they weren't in the room. you could be wrong. I say police are trained to intervene, and they have, in most cases, responsibility to intervene. Most jurisdictions, they're required to intervene in some manner, which can be simply calling 911 and ducking, but generally cops, will get involved. They got involved in police work to save lives, and they kind of react that way. So my opinion take on it, if you walked into the middle of that and saw this guy shooting innocent people, you would engage and try to stop that from happening. My opinion only. Your situation may be entirely different.
Well, you hit it on the head as being a former police officer. If I was by myself, I'm going to engage this guy because the training's going to kick in. I'm not going to let this guy kill innocent people if I've got, 30 plus years, well, more, but 31 years in the street of training and law enforcement. I have, since I've retired, I would have to evaluate whether or not I was with my family members or not. They're going to be the first people I'm going to protect. And if that means I'm going to grab them up and I'm going to get them the hell out of the area and get them away from the threat, I'm going to do that and make sure they're safe first and foremost. It's one of those things that this is going to happen, folks. It's going to happen. There's nothing you can do to stop this. There's nobody that you can bomb. There's nobody that you can put sanctions against. There are just evil, crazy people in the world. They are going to become crazy and evil, and they're going to do damage. I read this morning where in London, they arrested a man with a bunch of knives. The knife attack has been here already. It's going to continue. Any of you that have ever seen me on this show before, I go back to a 2004 raid that was done in Iraq, where they had taken basically a training manual from Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda said, keep planning for the big 9/11, the dirty bombs, the airplanes, the giant explosives. But also use what you have available. If what you have available is literally a knife or a stick or something like that, they are trying to get their people to do random attacks. And it's terrorism, plain and simple. We have seen a lot of it. The government, mostly under the former administration, if you they didn't have direct, oh, well, here's on Al-Qaeda stationery is a letter to, Binny Boon Bots that I want you to go out and commit this attack, and there's traffic back and forth between them. They considered them a lone wolf and with no direct ties to a terrorist organization. Although you can get on the internet and there is a million websites where these people become self-radicalized. I hate the term self-radicalization because what they're doing is they're getting on the Al-Qaeda, the ISIS, all of these websites, and these people are very, very good at what they do. They're very good at making that look oh so good. Oh, let's go wage jihad. Well, I can't really afford to get to Iraq or Syria, so I'll wage jihad here. It's been about less than 2 years ago. I think the young man that was over in university, I want to say somewhere in central California, he did a knife attack. The former administration said, oh, it wasn't a terrorism attack. It was just he was mad because nobody went out with him. No, that was a terrorist attack. He was self-radicalized and he was using that. Kind of getting back on this thing. If you're caught in the middle of this situation, Department of Homeland Security, one of the few things that they really, really have done well is their decisions on active shooter, and that's exactly what this is an active shooter incident. And they basically boil it down to run, hide, or fight. Run if you can, hide if you can, and if you can't do either one of the two, fight. And they're very good at, I don't intend to tell you that you should go and take a beer bottle to a gunfight with a guy with an AK-47. But if you have the means to defend yourself. If you can't get away from this or you can't hide from this, you have to be very careful if you're a civilian that if you're going to engage this guy. We had not too long ago, 2 Las Vegas Metropolitan Police officers were here having lunch, and 2 radical individuals killed them while they were having lunch. They left the restaurant and they went to a local Walmart where they were going to barricade themselves, and a CCW holder saw the male, got tunnel vision, which we in law enforcement training say try to look around because you get focused on that. He got tunnel vision on the armed male suspect, didn't see his female companion coming behind him, went to engage this guy, and she shot and killed him. He did a heroic thing, but you've got to be careful. Don't exceed your training. But yeah, you've got to do something. You can't, the Israelis for years, I've done a lot of work with them and looking at anti-terrorism in my career with the State Department. They're very much an armed society. I mean, they issue a lot of weapons to their people for this exact reason. They don't wait for a police officer necessarily to, if they're in a situation, a guy opens up, they're not going to wait for that. Usually the guy that's going to get, the person that's going to kill them is not going to be an Israeli police officer or a soldier. They may be a reservist or a former soldier, but they're going to be armed civilians. I have made it my policy since, well, really before, for many years, I've never gone anywhere without a gun. If I can legally carry one, now I will carry it. There's certain situations in certain places, obviously courthouses and those type of places, that I'm prohibited from carrying one. But I don't go anywhere without one because of situations like this. You literally could be sitting at a stoplight and be in the middle of a shooting like this. Yeah. So it really comes down to your training. Comes down to think about this. Take a minute. A lot of people don't do this, and I just don't see it done anymore. Take a minute and think about what if. Hey, I'm at work. What if somebody breaks through the door and starts shooting? A lot of places, a lot of businesses will offer training for that. The company that I currently work for, Textratics International here in Vegas, we do the same thing for corporate training. So it's one of those things. Think about what you got to do. What if this guy suddenly breaks in? Am I armed? Can I get to my gun? What if I'm on my way from my office at night to my car? What happens if that if they suddenly have a problem? Do you have we've talked about it multiple times. Where you carry your firearm if you have a CCW, can you get to it? Is it on your ankle? The ankle holster looked really good in the 60s. I don't know a cop that in the 70s or 80s that didn't carry one in an ankle holster.
They're so cool looking.
They were very cool looking, or a boot holster. But by the time you get to one, you usually get shot in the top of the head. So it all comes down to training. And again, go get training. I see so many people sometimes they get their CCW. They qualify with their CCW here in Nevada. It's a fairly easy course to qualify. And then they never shoot until the next time they have to shoot 5 years later.
Yeah. It's a big decision, and it's a very personal decision. You need to think about it before it happens. And if you're caught in the middle of something, we started about 5 minutes before, Charlie, so we're up on time now.
Sorry, I got blabby.
Well, that's all right. want to point out the next gun show here in town is Western Trails Gun and Knife Show, May 6 and 7 at the Henderson Convention Center. It's a decent show. I may make it out to the NRA table at that one. Then there's the Las Vegas Gun Show, May 13 and 14 at the Sports Center. We will be there with a table and answering questions and whatever if you would like. And then the large one, Crossroads of the West, is June 10 and 11 at Cashman Field. I have some passes for that one. That if you can't badge your way into these things anymore. I'm following that guy. Yeah, I've seen you do that. Customs.
I have no direct recollection of it. You were going to say I'm chasing a guy with counterfeit T-shirts, weren't you?
Yes. Well, I have. When Lenny was with Customs, I did have to go after him once or twice for making the world safe for Hard Rock T-shirts.
I never did that. That was the Federal Bureau of Investigations. But I tell you what, nobody ever got a counterfeit Nintendo game past me.
If you would like a pass, you can give me a call, leave the information on the phone, or send me an email at firedupmail.com. And I will get it and get one out to you so you can go to the Crossman Show. We will be there with answering questions and so forth like that. I've got a bunch of other stories we're going to have to save till next week because we're running beyond our allotted time with YouTube. We will be here next week. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this informative. This is a little bit different show than we normally do. And I don't directly teach CCW anymore, so maybe I'm trying to teach it on the air. But we'll be back next week. Thank you for listening. Have a good evening.